The evening breeze lightly stirred the curtains, whispering secrets into the dimly lit room where I sat, nursing a glass of whiskey. My phone, a relic from the past that should have been replaced ages ago, suddenly rang, cutting through the silence like a sharp intake of breath. With a reluctant sigh, I picked up. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, tinged with a mocking calmness that set my nerves on edge. "Why are you still chasing your wife? She chose me long ago." A cold chill raced down my spine. "Who is this?" He chuckled, a sound that seemed to crawl under my skin. "Let's just say I'm the one she's with now. You're just the crazy ex, aren't you?" My hand tightened around the phone. This had to be a sick joke. "Where is Emily? I want to talk to her." "She's done talking to you. Didn't she make that clear? Move on, man." The line went dead, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. My heart pounded against my rib cage, each beat screaming denial. This couldn't be true. Emily and I had been strained, yes, but to think she had someone else? That she'd tell him I was a stalker? Fury and betrayal swirled within me, merging into a dark, poisonous cloud. I slammed the glass down and grabbed my keys. I needed answers, and I knew just where to start. Emily's sister, Sarah, would know something. She had to. Driving through the night, the city lights blurred past like distant stars. When I reached Sarah's apartment, I didn't bother to knock. The door was unlocked, as it often was in this trustful neighborhood. "Sarah!" I called out, my voice echoing slightly in the compact hallway. She emerged from the kitchen, a frown creasing her forehead. "What's wrong?" "It's late." I wasted no time. "Is Emily seeing someone else?" Her expression changed, a mix of pity and discomfort. I thought you knew." "Knew? Knew what?" My heart sank. "Tell me." She sighed, taking a step closer. "Emily wanted to tell you herself. She met someone a few months ago. She thought it was casual at first, but..." "But what?" I pressed, feeling the room spin slightly. "They got serious. She was going to leave you, but she didn't know how to say it." Everything started to make sense, the late nights, the unexplained absences, the distant looks. Betrayal, sharp and bitter, settled in my stomach. I needed to act, to do something to reclaim my shattered dignity. "Thanks, Sarah." My voice was hollow, barely a whisper. Leaving her apartment, a plan began to take shape in my mind. If Emily wanted to discard our years together for a fling, I would ensure she regretted it. Not through petty revenge, but something more profound, more damaging. I would expose her deceit not just to our circle, but to everyone who mattered to her. The night air felt colder as I walked back to my car, the gears of retribution slowly turning. This was just the beginning. Emily had chosen her path, and now I would choose mine. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I sped through the deserted streets toward the city center, the earlier conversation with Sarah replaying in my mind like a cruel echo. The closer I got to Emily's favorite bar, a place she frequented under the guise of girls' night out, the tighter the knot of anger grew in my chest. Pulling into the parking lot, I spotted her car. My pulse quickened. It was past midnight, the perfect hour for shadows and whispered secrets. I parked a few cars down, making sure I wasn't too conspicuous, and waited. After what felt like hours but were only minutes, the bar's side door opened. Emily stepped out, her laughter floating in the night air, closely followed by a man whose arm was comfortably wrapped around her waist. They stopped, sharing a moment, oblivious to the world. That was my cue. I stepped out of the car, my approach silent but determined. As I drew closer, I cleared my throat loudly. They both turned, startled. Emily's face went pale as she recognized me. "Mark? What are you? What am I doing here?" I cut her off, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "I could ask you the same, Emily." The man beside her stepped forward, protective. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes," I snapped, my gaze fixed on Emily. The problem is my wife hasn't yet figured out how to tell her husband she's leaving him for a, I sized him up disdainfully, guy like you. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but I had no sympathy left. Who is he, Emily? Or don't you think I deserve to know? She was shaking, tears now streaming down her face. Mark, I was going to tell you. It's just. Save it, I said, cutting her off again. I turned to the man. Did you know she was married? He looked between Emily and me, confusion and realization dawning in his eyes. She said it was complicated. That they were separated. Lies, I spat the word out like it was venom. We're very much married. Tell him, Emily. Tell him how you lied to us both. Emily sobbed, covering her face with her hands. I'm sorry. I was going to end it, I swear. I just didn't know how. The man backed away slightly, his face hardening. I don't need this drama. He looked at Emily with a mixture of disgust and pity before turning to leave. You should have been honest with me. As he disappeared into the night, Emily turned to me, a desperate plea in her eyes. Mark, please, can we talk about this? Just not here, not like this. No, Emily. The finality in my voice surprised even me. You've made your choices. Now live with them. Leaving her there, alone and crying, felt like the ultimate betrayal, but it was her own deceit that had led us here. As I drove away, the seeds of a deeper plan took root. She would understand the full consequence of her actions, sooner rather than later. This was just the beginning of her undoing. The night had closed in, cold and unforgiving, much like the path I was now committed to. The next morning dawned bleak and grey, mirroring the turmoil inside me. I sat at the kitchen table, the untouched coffee in front of me cold and bitter. Today was the day I would start unraveling Emily's life, thread by thread. The first step was simple, exposure. I powered up my laptop and began compiling all the evidence of Emily's affair, the texts, the emails, the photos from last night. Each file felt like a stone in my heart, but my resolve did not waver. By the time I was done, I had a detailed dossier that painted a clear picture of her deception. As I attached the final file to an email addressed to her family, her friends, and a few close colleagues, my finger hovered over the sender button. This was it. With a deep breath, I clicked it. The deed was done. There was no turning back now. Within hours, the responses began to trickle in. Shock. Disbelief. Anger. They all echoed my feelings, but magnified them through the lens of betrayal experienced vicariously. Emily's phone must have been ringing off the hook, but before she could trace anything back to me, I had one more card to play. I called her best friend, Lisa, ensuring my voice was calm and controlled. Lisa, it's Mark. Have you heard from Emily today? There was a pause on the line. Yes, I just. Mark, what's going on? Everyone's talking about pictures and emails. I'm afraid Emily's been leading a double life, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I found out last night. I thought it only fair to let others know, especially those who think they know her. Lisa's sigh was heavy. This is a lot. I need to process this, Mark. I'll talk to Emily. Of course, I replied, knowing full well the chaos I had just unleashed in her social circle. The next phase required a more personal touch. I drove to Emily's office, my determination a hard knot in my stomach. As I entered the lobby, the receptionist gave me a wary look, probably recognizing me from the photos I'd circulated. I need to see Emily, I stated firmly. It's urgent. She hesitated, then picked up the phone. Moments later, Emily appeared. Her eyes were red, her usual composed demeanor shattered. She glanced nervously around before leading me to a small conference room. Why are you doing this? Her voice was a whisper, raw with emotion. You brought this on yourself, I replied coldly. You could have come clean at any time. Instead, you chose to lie. To me, to him, to everyone. Emily shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I made a mistake, Mark. I'm sorry. I never meant for things to get this far. Sorry doesn't change what you did. Doesn't undo the hurt. I stood, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'll be filing for divorce. Expect the papers soon. Turning on my heel, I left her there, sobbing into her hands. As I walked out of the building, a part of me felt a pang of regret, quickly crushed by the heavier weight of betrayal. Retribution had its price, and as I drove away, the skies opened up, rain washing over the city as if trying to cleanse the wounds that would likely never fully heal. The battle was far from over, but the lines were now drawn, and I was ready for whatever came next. As the days turned into weeks, the landscape of my life had shifted dramatically. The once shared spaces between Emily and me now felt like ghostly echoes of a life that had crumbled under the weight of betrayal. The divorce proceedings were cold and calculated, stripped of any semblance of the love that had once bound us. One evening, as I sat in my dimly lit living room, the quiet was broken by a knock at the door. I opened it to find Detective Alan Hayes on my doorstep, his expression grim. "Mark, we need to talk," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "What's this about, detective?" I asked, masking my anxiety with indifference. "It's about Emily," he started, his eyes searching mine for any flicker of reaction. "She's gone missing." "Gone missing?" I repeated, feigning surprise. "How?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Hayes replied, his voice steady. "Her friends and family haven't heard from her in days. They found her car abandoned near the river. And your name keeps coming up." I shrugged, keeping my composure. "We're going through a divorce. It's hardly amicable, but I haven't seen her." Hayes nodded, jotting something in his notebook. "All right. If you think of anything that might help, give me a call." After he left, I sat back, a slow smile creeping across my face. Emily wasn't missing, she was exactly where I'd planned for her to be, far away, starting anew under a new identity we'd crafted together as part of a final act of manipulation and deceit against those who had wronged us both. Her disappearance was the last piece in our intricate plan of vengeance. Over the next few days, I enacted the final stages of my scheme. Utilizing skills I had honed over years in cybersecurity, I launched a series of attacks on the financial and personal lives of those who had sided with Emily during our split, draining accounts and planting evidence of criminal activities. As the chaos unfolded, I received a letter with a foreign stamp, the signal I'd been waiting for. Emily was safe, her part in our plan complete, her old life erased. One night, I drove to the airport with a one-way ticket in my pocket. As I waited to board the flight that would take me to a new beginning, my phone rang. It was Detective Hayes. "Mark, we've found something." "A letter from Emily, addressed to you," he said, his tone confused. "She's not missing. She left willingly." "But why?" "Sometimes, detective, the best way to hide the truth is to make everyone look the other way," I replied cryptically. "And the havoc you wreaked," he pressed. "A distraction." "And a lesson on betrayal," I said, ending the call. As I turned off my phone, the final boarding call echoed through the terminal. I stepped onto the plane, leaving behind the remnants of a life defined by deceit. Emily and I, bound by our shared hatred of betrayal, had played our parts to the end. Now, miles and identities apart, our paths would never cross again. This was our ruthless revenge, a life for a life, a betrayal for a betrayal, a game well played in the shadows of trust and deception.